I love Matthew chapter 18, and we're following a series of readings. We're kind of moving our way through that, just like we're moving through the story of Moses right now in the Old Testament. In the current lectionary track, we follow Moses for quite a while, and part of that is just the track that we follow. It's called the narrative track, so we hear the story. Sometimes those readings don't always connect in the same way to the gospel that we might have heard in previous times when we've been through the lectionary. But today, both the reading from Romans and this reading from Matthew circle around how we treat one another, right? And what it is in God's economy, so to speak, in how we approach one another and what we do in our human relationships. Paul, writing, just so you know, this is not justification for you to pick on vegetarians. Did you hear that? You need to dive a little deeper into what Paul is talking about in that moment. Paul is talking about the varied religious traditions around both the day of the Lord's Supper, but also how people approached their faith life. And you need to remember when he's writing the people in the Romans, this is a group of people that would be coming from lots of different styles and religions. So you have people who are coming out of the Roman tradition, which has, most of us know much about the Roman religion, and so there's a little bit of that context. There's the context of the people who are Jewish, who are part of the movement, and they're coming in. There's going to be a Greek element. There's going to be lots of other people coming from lots of different religious backgrounds, and they all have different practices because your diet is often how you are identified within your religion, right? They weren't thinking about what's healthy. They weren't thinking about, weight loss. There's, none of those sorts of things. They were living out their way, and Paul is hearing, right? The whole letter to the Romans is about Paul sort of trying to correct this small group of Christians that are early in their formation in the things that they aren't quite doing right. And this is one of those passages where he's like, don't be quite so hard on each other, right? Don't judge one another. Don't pick on each other. And, these surface things, right? What somebody eats or what somebody does, this are not the critical things. Let people be who they are and, come into this. And this whole sort of several chapters is about those different sort of complexities. And then we get this beautiful story that Jesus tells. Peter comes up and he's always kind of trying to show off. You guys realize that, right? Because he's always asking questions. He's like, he knows the answer, maybe. And he's like, Jesus, how many times since I might be the greatest, right, Peter? Should we forgive our neighbors? He's sort of like the teacher's pet. Do you get that? And Jesus hears that, and he says, not 7 times, Peter, but 77 times. And he tells this wonderful story of the wicked servant, right, or the wicked master. It depends on who titles it. And so in the first example, the servant, the slave, owes 10,000 talents, right? Now, how many of you, who knows how much a talent is? How many gold pieces a talent is? Anybody? Good, so whatever I say is right. Some people say it's about 2,000 gold pieces. So a gold piece would be a significant value, and so 1 talent is probably a lifetime of wealth, okay? So the slave, right, the title is slave, owes 10,000 lifetimes of money to the person that he is enslaved to. So this is not a little bit. Do you understand that? Like, this is not, Jesus' example is not like he owes him $100. This is lots and lots and lots of wealth, right? And when he pleads to the master says, I'm going to forgive this, and go on your way. And then he encounters his buddy, right, who's indebted to him, who owes him 100 denarii. Now, who knows how much a denarii is? Good, I'm going to be right again. It's not much. It's pocket change, okay? So he's got 100 pocket changes. This is not a ton of money, right? This is not a huge amount. And what does this person do? But he is really hard on this person, right? And of course, Jesus' example of these two examples is to show a little bit of the absurdity, right, of this person holding it over another person. And then we get our key line at the end, that you have, part of our understanding is that we need to forgive one another, right, from the heart. We need to be eager to do that because God has forgiven so much more from us. And so our call is to be in community with one another and to forgive each other. When we encounter this as a child, maybe in Sunday school or maybe an early thing, when we start learning about sin or we learn about forgiveness, we might learn things like forgive and forget. And often when we're learning it as a child, it's the stuff that we understand, so it's sort of playground, right? So Johnny or Susie took my ball or my gum, and I've got to forgive them because they did that, right? And that's often where we sort of start. And I think sometimes, even as adults, we think that's where, the forgiveness is or the realities are. It's that sort of surface, right? It's the little things. Someone cut me off getting my parking spot. I forgave them, kind of stuff like that. And what I have found in listening to people over the years is when we dive a little deeper into that, there's the really hard things in our life that are impossible or almost stuff that we just can't forgive. It's the kind of things that have happened to us that cut us to the core, that are hurts or harms or realities or broken trust or broken relationship or violations or whatever it might be that just, they get a hold of our soul and we can't quite move past it. And that's the stuff, when we really get into it, that's really hard, right? That's a hard spiritual walk to be able to forgive. To be able to forgive another person, even if they don't ask for forgiveness. To work towards where we're forgiving. I think it's always important to say when we're talking about this that these kinds of things do not give permission for people to stay in abusive situations, okay? So you aren't failing spiritually if you're in an abusive situation and you leave that. That is not what this is about, right? This is about how we approach this really difficult challenge. And sometimes there are those surface forgivenesses, and maybe we can get stuck on those, but we kind of have to work past, and we think about that. But that really hard work of what we do. Brene Brown talks about this in a couple of her books, and also there's a wonderful TED Talk on forgiveness that talks a little bit about sort of what I'm going to share with you, and that is part of the act of forgiving, right, is internal to the one who is forgiving, of being able to let go, and often it disempowers the person that has harmed you. It disempowers their hold over you or what it is that's holding on. And this is one of the kind of hard things, is it lets us move on, right? And I think Jesus understood this. It lets us move on from that which is holding us. And again, this is hard spiritual work. It's not something that we can often do quickly, and it's not something that is, again, just on the surface, but it's that hard reality to forgive someone from the heart, right? Releases the hold they have on you, but also allows you to move on from that. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges in our own faith walk and what we do. We think about things that affect us throughout our life, whether we've been traumatized at different points in our life or whether we hurts that happen. And yet when we are able to let go, right, then our life is transformed. Lent is a great season to work on some of this, and it might be that you begin your work of forgiving and you do some work around that, or it can be a time where you might be the person that needs to seek forgiveness from someone else, right? You may be carrying that you felt the harm you had done to someone else, and you've just never reconciled with that, and you might go through an attempted reconciliation with that person. But this hard spiritual work, when it gets to the real matters of our life, I think is that thing that's closest to us. So I want you just to sort of maybe contemplate or pray or think a little bit about, your own way that you interact with people. Maybe you take that passage from Romans and you think about, how am I judging everybody else around me, right? Come on, we all do it, right? I can't believe what I saw. How many of you, you ever call somebody, oh my God, you should have seen what I saw at Quick Trip the other day. I couldn't believe it. This guy, probably saw me filling up my Diet Coke. He got 7 gallons of Diet Coke for one drink. I can't believe it. We do this kind of hard work. Not hard work, but we do this kind of thing to each other all the time. We look with judgment. Like, I'm a clergy person, so if I attend another church, can I let you know where my head goes? I criticize the whole time. Well, I wouldn't do that. We got way better musicians than they do. There's you kind of do this kind of surface stuff. Or I wouldn't approach the scriptures quite like that. And what does that do? But it blocks us, right, from being in our vulnerability. So if we see another person and we judge their dress, we judge their status in life, we judge their car, we judge their relationships, we judge their friendships, we judge their children, we judge what they eat, we judge whatever it is, it actually, I think, prevents us from having that deeper relationship with them or that place of vulnerability. And Paul is writing about that and is saying, let them be, right? And he's sort of calling us, he says, instead, work on your relationship with God. Work on your relationship with each other. Or maybe you go a little further into this idea of how do you forgive? Or how do you seek forgiveness? And maybe think about what you might need to forgive in order to be released, right, from that which is holding you. And again, it's that thing that comes from the heart. And our faith needs to be authentic. Authentic, real, and raw before God. Amen.